We've been building up to this for a while now, so let's... well, there's something else I'd like to show you. Don't get too mad, but this is going to make you an even better developer. Really, it will. We're going to start off by making our request the wrong way. Yes, that's right. I'm going to intentionally show you how to do something the wrong way, but only to reinforce and better explain the correct way. The code we wind up writing here will still be useful, so make sure you follow along. We'll clean it up shortly. We actually haven't run our app yet since, well, there really isn't much to run. Let's make sure that we get our emulator up and running though, so it will be ready for us here in a bit. We'll start the Android Virtual Device Manager, AVD Manager, select a device to emulate and run. Great, we can set that into the background now that it's up and running. And we can close this out. Now we need to get some info from Dark Sky. Let's go back here to their developer site and copy this sample API call URL. This will let us get the weather for Alcatraz Island in the San Francisco Bay of California. Now let's go back to Android Studio and put it to work. Let's go into main activity under app in Java and under com.teamtreehouse.stormy here in main activity. So here in the onCreate method, let's build a URL. We'll call it string forecast URL. We'll set it equal to our string that we just copied from Dark Sky. Seems like it would make sense to refactor that a bit and pull out some of the information in that URL. Things like our API key, latitude, and longitude would be better served to be their own variables. Let's set that up. So let's set up a string for API key. And we can just cut this out or copy and paste that. And our latitude and longitude are doubles, so we can add those in. Latitude. Copy our latitude here. Longitude. Grab our longitude value. Now we can reformat our forecast URL variable. Come in here, concatenate our API key, plus the slash, no spaces, latitude, get that comma in there, again, no spaces. We want our longitude. And we can get rid of all that. Now that line's a little bit long, so let's drop that down. Cool. Now we need to use this. Let's look back at OKHTTP's site. So back here at their website, we have this wiki link. Come here, using OKHTTP, and then go to recipes. There are several of these recipes available, so let's see here. This synchronous get looks promising. It says that it downloads a file, prints the header, and the response body, our data, as a string. That sounds like what we need. We know, because of the API documentation and its contract with us, that we'll get back JSON data. We could do a lot of different things with it, which we'll get to. For now, however, let's just print the data to the log to get something happening. If we look down here, we see a recipe for their synchronous get methods. So let's work through this recipe bit by bit here. It looks a little daunting and with a lot of steps, but they start with small pieces and we'll build from there. Recipes like this are great because once they make sense, you can copy and paste them without having to remember all the details each time. So let's head back over to Android Studio and our onCreate method. So first we'll need to create an OKHTTP client object. So down here, OKHTTP client, we'll call it client. It's a new OKHTTP client. We'll use that as our main client object. Next, we need to build a request for the client to send to the Dark Sky server. Recall from earlier that this is part of the request-response cycle. We do request. We'll call it request. It's a new request builder. And we can change together the necessary methods for a new request object. So we want URL. We're going to pass it in the forecast URL. And we'll ask it to build. I find it a little bit more readable to have these methods on separate lines. So let's refactor that just slightly, and we'll put these on separate lines. Next, we need to put this request inside a call object. We'll do call. We'll call it call. Client, new call. We'll pass it in a request. Option enter to handle our imports. Nice. The call class has an execute method that we can use here on our call object to get the response. Let's store that in a response variable. Response, call it response. Option enter. For our imports, call.execute. Well, Android Studio is now showing that we have an error. If we hover over it, we see that it's an unhandled exception error. This is okay and to be expected. The execute method throws an exception and we aren't handling or catching it. You may already know this from our Java courses. If not, there's no need to worry. We'll discuss it shortly. For now, place your cursor somewhere in the air, designated by this red squiggly line. Hit Alt-Enter, which pops up the quick fix. First option there is the one we want, surround with try-catch. Great. However, let's update this to print the error to the log. Log error. Exception caught. Log the error. Get our imports. Let's go back up here and define our tag. Public static final. A string, call it tag. Main activity dot class. Get simple name. Nice. Now let's go back and add a check to see if the request was successful. We can use a convenient method from the response class to do this. Right after our execute line, let's add an if statement to check the success. So if response is successful, we'll just log the entire response body. Tag response body string. Note here that the string method is not to be confused with toString. This comes from the example recipe on the OK-HTTP site. All right, we've set up our URL and followed the OK-HTTP recipe, so we should be all set. We should be able to see the response printed to the log as soon as our activity starts. Let's test it out. Run our app, select that device, go here to the emulator. Uh-oh, there's an error. Let's look here in the log and see what it is. Expand this up a little bit. Looking here in the log, we see it is a network on main thread exception error. It's the one I expected. Recall I said I'd show you the wrong way first. This is it. We were using the code for a synchronous GET request. Okay, so we have an error. It's really not the end of the world, and in fact, it's a huge learning benefit. Plus, we've done a lot of things correctly. We made a basic request from the web to get data. That's powerful in and of itself. Before we dive in to fix that error, I'd like to have a discussion with you about concurrency.